Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus. Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Camp Hacker. This podcast is dedicated to what many professionals believe to be the most important time at camp, no matter what you call it, staff training, staff orientation, or leadership training. This critical time period prepares your staff to fulfill all the promises that you make to parents and customers the rest of the year. Before we begin, I would like to have my co-hosts introduce themselves. So why don't we start with our neighbors to the south? We'll start with Ruby.
I'm Ruby Compton. I'm the Summer Camp Program Director at Green River Preserve in western North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We're a summer camp focused on connecting children with nature, and we do that on a 3,400-acre private wildlife preserve.
Great, thank you. And my fellow Canadian.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Waro. Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on positive girl community, and we also have a linguistic program.
Excellent. And I'm Beth Allison. I am one of the owners of Camp Hacker, along with my husband, Travis. And I was a camp director for 15 years with Travis in the Muskoka area of Ontario, Canada. We were a co-ed camp and eventually had 5 camps under our belts. And now we are camp consultants. My big passion is staff training. So this podcast is one of my favorite things to do. Today, our topic is staff training themes. And this one was a tough one for me because I had to rattle my brain and go back way far in time and try to remember themes that we have done. But when they came to me, I remembered a lot of great moments in camping. So we'll talk about those later on. But before we do, Ruby, could you just tell us why we've chosen this topic today?
Sure thing. So if we want our staff to feel a part of the excitement and the energy and to understand how camp will work, we need to get them on board as soon as possible, maybe even before they arrive. So we have themes with the campers during our programming, but we also need to have themes with the staff. They allow us to be creative, to have fun, but also reinforce the ideas we are trying to instill. Themes allow our staff to feel like they are a part of something bigger than themselves. And they're able to say, hey, remember in 2009, we loved that theme. It also allows the directors to put a new spin on the same stuff we cover from year to year and potentially incorporate different medias to appeal to those different learning styles that we have on staff.
Great, thank you. So we're going to dive right in. Gabrielle, what was one of your favorite themes that you have done in staff training?
One of my favorites was when we had a big changeover year. We had a very large changeover year. We had a great summer the year before, but it's just one of those things that camps go through where a lot of your staff aren't returning. So we had a lot of new staff. And our theme was We Are Making History. And we talked about how at camp, it's actually part of our history to have these cycles, these changeover years. And we looked at all the different years where we had those changes and some of the really positive things that came out of it. And so the whole link was, first, this is part of our history when there's a changeover year, and also we have the power to make history. This is a great time to implement change. And so we also met with a lot of our returning staff members. We talked about what direction we want to go in with camp. How do we want to run staff training so that our new staff members know, what our camp is all about and what do we want to model for them. And it was such a powerful summer that our next summer session was our training. Our returning staff were asking, are we going to meet again? Are we going to talk about what direction we're going to go this year? So I really, really enjoyed that theme.
Nice. Great. I love that idea. It has some deep roots in it.
Yeah.
Were there specific things that you remember doing in that week of training in terms of history?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I got from you, Beth, was we really wanted to introduce to our staff, who we are, and a lot of our returning staff. We realized, yes, we give them the regular slideshow, where camp comes from and the founders, but we never had an opportunity to take out all of our archives and really look at it. And so we did a big exercise where we put all of these photos, these old photos on the ground. And and not so old photos, and talked about, you know, how the gift of what the previous summer gave to us, and what is going to be our gift to the next summer. And we highlighted a lot of the different changes throughout the years, and how camp got better and better because of these contributions, and that we're sitting on the shoulders of, or standing on the shoulders of, people that had a vision, and we're continuing that vision. So just a sort of a quiet walk, looking at all the images by themselves and reflecting, was one of my favorite. And we had, of course, like fairy lights up, and it was done in silence, and it was quite moving. And then we had also people write down on big pieces of paper what they're experiencing when they're looking at certain images. And some of our new staff had some really insightful things. They're commenting on what people were doing, and that they felt so privileged to be part of a place that had such a large history. And I think this is something that you can do even if your camp has been around for 15 years. That's young in camp years, but there's still a lot of steps that have brought you to that. Or do a reverse thing. Where are we going to be? What are they looking at when they see us, today? So maybe do a reverse one if you don't have a large history. So yeah, that was it was a very easy one to do, but it was very, very powerful.
Nice. And I love the idea of talking with young adults about legacy and how they're going to leave their legacy. And it's one of my favorite things to do with staff. So I love that idea of doing a week of history. Thanks.
Yeah, it was great. No
Ruby,
problem.
What do you got for us?
Sure. So one of the themes that I think is a great idea, there's lots of movies out there that you could very easily expand into a staff training theme. And one that I actually have never seen this happen, but I think it's brilliant, and I think it could be a lot of fun. And this time of year is actually the time to start planning for it, because it's a theme based on the movie Elf. If you've ever watched the movie with Will Ferrell, he is so happy and innocent and just eyes wide open to the world, but just thrilled about everything. And you could totally see how that would relate to our staff. It's almost like when our campers and our parents walk on to camp property, they just are greeted with these people that seem totally unreal, but genuine, but just totally unreal, because nobody's ever this happy. But that's the world that we create at camp. And so very easily you could see how you could haul out those old Christmas decorations and put them up and around, have Santa's workshop where you're working on skills and developing whatever that cool toy or game is going to be for the summer. There's just so many ways you could take it, and you can use a lot of the clips in that movie to energize your staff and get them thinking about how they can act, and just so many things that are fun about it. So that's just one to kind of get the wheels turning, and if you're needing some inspiration on a staff training theme, maybe go back and watch that movie now, and you might find all sorts of things that will relate.
It's a great movie. My boys are now 24 and 28, and the four of us sit down every Christmas and still watch that movie together. But I came across a couple of years ago 10 life lessons that you can learn from Elf. And I came across it online. So if anybody's looking for it, they can just message me and I can send it to you. It's not mine. It's someone else has come up with it, but it's really great things and life lessons that we can take from Elf, which I think would maybe contribute to a bit of that training theme. But anything that has to do with Christmas is always one of my favorites anyway. It was me trying not to do Christmas every year. That was the problem. One of the themes that we did one year, we had a year where we found like our staff had become so intent on what they were teaching and what their jobs were. And everybody was so serious about their role, which is fantastic and not a problem you want to complain about. But we decided to do a theme of leadership training called Come as a Child. And so everything that we did around it was about childhood. So, when they arrived on the first day, they were greeted by their favorite childhood characters. And so we went very Canadian, and I don't know if these shows were ever shown in the States, but they were greeted by the Friendly Giant and Mr. Dress Up and, characters that were Mr. Rogers, those kinds of people who were very gentle, lovely souls in our childhood. We made time every day to play with balloon animals, with bubbles, to play for the sake of play. We played Mother May I and Red Light, Green Light, and we built a fort and we ate lunch in it. And every day after lunch, we had story time with blankets. And Mr. Rogers came out every day and, took his sweater off, or took his jacket off, put his sweater on, sat down, read the story. And that was the year that we did a lot of creative things with our hands. We made a 3D map of our summer camp, our actual camp on the first day, so that was our tour for new people, rather than simply just getting a tour. They could stand back and see it in 3D, but it took 2 or 3 hours for them to make, and it was a great team building exercise. Our business meeting that year was held in superhero headquarters, so everybody had to come dressed up and go in the secret way, which was through a window. It was kind of difficult, but it was fun to watch. One of our sessions we had as a tea party, where we had, special cups and saucers and tea and little sandwiches, and we all dressed up, but we still had our session that way. We made puppets together and used them throughout training to have them workout sessions, workout topics about working with children and all those kinds of things, but we use their puppets. One of the evenings, we had an evening program, which we do every night at leadership training. We squeeze one in at the end just so that they can have some fun and see how we would like to have evening programs run. So we had a birthday party with, pin the tail on the donkey and musical chairs and all those kinds of things, but we would debrief and discuss these things as we went. So we would talk about how these games of childhood could be made more inclusive, or, like musical chairs, if you got out, what could you do now? Could you help judge, or could you go on to do other activities, and ways in which we could incorporate that? But just having that mindset of being a child, we had our site director, Adam Brown, TAPS is his camp name, one of my favorite people on the planet, took them out, all of the staff, into the forest and played with no toys, with no equipment, with nothing, for an hour. They just played. And I still have staff who will come and tell me that 8 years later, that was their very favorite time at camp, going into the woods and building forts and making, magical fairies and all that kind of stuff. So it really helped make training focused on the children who were coming, as well as give them a good time. So it was one of my favorites to come as a child. Gav, have you got another one?
What I have is epic fail. So this wasn't something that we were, say, okay, our theme for our staff training is epic fail, but it was a theme within our sessions and within what we were doing, that was, if you will, subconsciously added. So what we noticed was a lot of our staff members they were trying to be perfect. So perfect at their skits, perfect at speaking their second language, perfect at almost anything they're doing, and they were putting a lot of pressure on themselves. And so we wanted to flip that and celebrate the failures, the epic failures, when somebody put themselves out there. And so purposely at the beginning of our staff training, we had some of our leadership team members do skits and on purpose not do very well and call it like epic fail. And it was just introduced in a light way, so that staff members started to get that as long as you're trying hard, as long as you're putting yourself out there, that's what we want our campers to do. And so it just became a thing. That was an epic fail. And it really created an environment where trying was the goal and not necessarily succeeding. And it also allowed staff members to ask more questions, to say, I don't understand this. And we saw quite a strong shift in our staff members, and a lot of pressure was alleviated because they knew they didn't have to be this, sort of perfectionist type. And how we also knew that was the type of group that was going to be coming in, because you're always looking at the type of staff that you have. was the CIT year, the year before. We really noticed that within this group, there was a lot of strong. They just cared so much about camp. They just wanted to show that they knew how to do everything. So we figured as they came in, if we have some of the older staff members saying, "This is what it means to be staff. You try, and it's cool. It's cool to try, and it's okay to fail." So that wasn't like an outright theme, but it was something that we had implemented, and it worked marvelously. Merveilleusement. See, epic fail, crushed it.
And you sort of ran that through your training, which is great.
Yeah, we ran it through the training. Yeah. There's a great activity that John Jorgensen runs, which is, I think, in Carl Ronke's Silver Bullets, which is called Trash Ball. And it's so wonderful how Jorgie runs it, and I run it myself. And it's basically, you have a ball that you make out of trash, which is paper and tape, and you come up with a cool move with a partner, and you know the cooler the move, the bigger the cheer you get. Mm-hmm. And once they do their cool move, the rest of the group is supposed to try to copy that cool move. And the role of the facilitator when those two people are doing their cool move is to do a recap of how they did this cool move, and hopefully the two first people that go make a mistake, like one drops the ball. And so the facilitator will emphasize, now this is very important, Beth purposely moved her hands and the ball bounced off her shoulder. So everybody make sure that you're getting all these parts. So people start to get that because they just tried to make the coolest move, they're not going to get it perfectly. And so you start with sort of activities like that at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And you say, now that's a cool move. And of course we debrief it. And yeah.
Nice.
Loved it.
Thank you. Ruby.
Cool. So the theme that we did last year during staff training was a university theme. And I had visions of it being like Hogwarts and people walking around in robes and whatever else. We didn't quite get that far, but some of the things that we did that I thought were pretty fun was we made a really subtle change on our letterhead. And so above our logo, where we had the triangle logo, and underneath it, Green River Preserve, we put right above it, University of. And it was a really subtle thing, but that was the letter that was included in the packet that the staff got when they arrived at camp. We set up the schedule, kind of like a class schedule. There was homework every night, because I give homework regardless during staff training, so that fit in really well. We had some elective sessions where folks could choose which activity or session they wanted to go to. And my all-time favorite thing that we did is we did a graduation ceremony. And a lot of this theme really stemmed from trying to figure out what was going to be on the back of our t-shirts. As much as I prized and just cherished my first staff t-shirt that said staff on the back of it, a lot of times with Green River, we try to put something else on the back of the t-shirt. So my first summer, it was Safety Patrol. This past year, it was Campologist, which we totally borrowed from a couple other camps. Nice. That I saw on the Summer Camp Pros Facebook page when I posed the question of, like, what do you put on the back of your t-shirt? So I loved the idea of our staff becoming experts in camp and getting their campologist degree. And so we took all the hats from the costume closet and we ordered tassels, and we put tassels on all the hats. And nice. So before this graduation ceremony, all the staff, got a hat out of the costume bin and it had a tassel on it. We set up a podium on our deck and chairs, and the staff sat in line. They had to order themselves in alphabetical order. And when their name was called, they were handed a rolled up T-shirt. It was their staff T-shirt, and it had a little ribbon wrapped around it. It looked just like a diploma. And we shook hands and called everybody's formal name. And we had a graduation speaker. My intern that summer wrote an incredible speech that was all the cliche things that you hear in a graduation speech, but also really relating them to camp too. And then we had a big lunch afterwards, a celebration, and we played every graduation song that's ever existed, or all the really cheesy songs that you always hear at graduation ceremonies. But really trying to point out the fact that this is the beginning. You know, you hear that at graduation ceremonies, like this is the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. And you've been given all these skills, and you always have this group of people that you can call on. All those things that you hear at a graduation ceremony, I think, are equally as true on the last day of staff training. And the other thing that it did is it set up our community for, we are going to continue to learn. We are going to always have opportunities for learning, always have opportunities for teaching throughout the rest of the summer. And so that was a lot of fun, and just something that I really enjoyed and worked really well for our camp, because we are a camp that serves a lot of gifted children, and a lot of our staff come in with very academically rigorous, you know, schedules in the other part of their lives. And so we didn't want to create that kind of stress, but it is a little bit comforting to come in and see some of these terms that you're used to, and that's the world that they're coming from. Most of them are coming from a university atmosphere. So it brings a little bit of comfort to their day when they're first getting started. But we had a lot of fun with it. There's so much more we could do with it, and I'm super excited about that, and kind of redoing it again in the future. But graduation was super fun.
Nice. I really like that one. One year, and I had to go back 10 years, almost 11, I guess, for this one, but it was in 2004, and it was the year that reality TV really hit the airwaves, and it was this big thing to have reality television shows. So we wanted to focus on the real reality that they were having at summer camps. So we invited them for a week of GMC TV. So it was Glenmore Camp Total Vision is what TV stood for. And so we built a large, like 6-foot remote control that was in the dining hall in our session area for the week. And so when if you kind of have to think back 10 years to old technology, but when they arrived at camp, they got a letter where we had put in every command that's on a remote control into the letter. So it was like, welcome to this remote wilderness. Your adventure is about to begin. It's time to recall the wonders of childhood, play, turn up the volume, or turn it down, as the case may be. Sometimes maybe even to mute it. Pause once in a while to enjoy your surroundings. Select from our amazing camp menu. Learn as much info as possible, and cancel all ideas of a boring summer in the city. Let's all get on the same page, tap into your power, and picture yourself as an amazing member of the staff of 2004. It's time to channel your energy in the right direction, display your gifts and talents, and let us guide you in your journey. So it was this whole sort of intro to a new reality. And we even went so far as to have an envelope for every person who drove a staff member to camp. And so it was their nomination. So we did the Emmys through the week, and the parents got, or family member got, a nomination for a supporting role. And so they had a letter inside thanking them for driving their staff members to camp, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. We did, because this was back 10 years, but one of the nights we did Trading Spaces. I don't know if anybody remembers that show, but I'm kind of dating myself. But we had the cabins, staff cabins, trade with one another, and they did a makeover of the other cabin group's cabin. So they decorated, they put up great posters of affirmation, they left love notes, they put up curtains, you know, it was all kinds of stuff. And we had a host and a film crew, and the big reveals where we got to go around and see all the cabins that were done. We did Glenmore's Next Top Model and showed what a staff member should really look like. The remote control that was in the dining hall allowed staff to run up and press the pause button if they needed us to stop in the middle of a session and kind of look into something further, or press the rewind button during a session if they needed something repeated. So if they had a question and we needed to take a pause. On Saturday morning, we had Saturday morning cartoon pajama breakfast with sugary cereals, which we never had at camp, but you know, it was a special thing. We did a fear factor night where they had to eat dirt and worms, which of course is that, you know, pudding and gummy worm thing. We did a what not to wear episode so that they could see what to wear at camp, like, you know, they didn't wear backless shoes or that kind of stuff. We lit the flames on the last night, like Survivor, where the tribe has spoken, but no one ever had their flame extinguished. That was the important part. We had TV dinners one night where everybody had all their dinner came wrapped in tinfoil, and then we sat in front of this giant television set. So each cabin was responsible for doing a show. So they did like a 5-minute skit or song, and we kept changing the channel. So each cabin got to do that. And then, of course, we finally turned off the TV and one night and had a big family game night with a life-size game board. So we kind of really focused on taking it away from television and reality shows. And we had a session talking about the dangers of reality shows with teens and all that kind of stuff too. But it just allowed us to kind of play a little bit with important things that we had to talk about. So it was a fun one, as I recall. But it was nice to relive that memory for me.
That sounds so great.
It was fun.
So fun.
It was fun. And of course you can use whatever's on TV now. You know, I believe we also had a CSI night too, where we had to go in and, you know, take apart something like a bad scenario that had happened and sort of take it apart and see what actually took place, find the clues to the scenario, like whatever happened with a camper who was crying and had run away. What's the CSI in you going to do to figure out how that camper got to that point? So, you know, you can take any of those TV shows. But of course, our big message was that we're not about living a life that's on a screen, but this is the true reality. So it was fun that way. Why don't we go around one more time? Gab, what do you got?
Well, I was actually going to say that though our theme today is to talk about staff training themes, I've actually stopped doing themes approximately 3 years ago for our staff training. And I'm not saying that I won't go back, but at one point, what I was realizing was that I was trying very hard to fit sessions and meal times into what our theme was, and the themes were just getting more and more elaborate, that our leadership team was spending so much time into developing the themes, and that we were sort of starting, I think, to lose focus a little bit on our camp mission. And so what we do now is there's always a theme. Like, I mean, you do need to have a purpose and a mission to inspire staff to move in a certain direction, especially for those staff members that are returning staff members. They have to feel part of something that's bigger than your camp. So what we do is we try to focus on an aspect of our mission, and use that as a motivating aspect. And I think that all of these ideas that we have right now that I'm looking at, which we will be recapping at the end of the podcast, are great, that there's certain pieces of those that I would totally use throughout the summer. You know, sort of childlike, inspiration and the educational aspect. But we've sort of toned down our themes. I think we went a little theme crazy, and we sort of started toning it down. And right now, it seems to be really working. And I think that if there will be a summer and when there will be a summer, I should say, where theme will be very helpful, we will implement consciously a theme. But for the moment, we've actually toned that down.
Great. Well, thank you. That I really appreciate that different perspective on it. I think that sometimes we do get too caught up in things, and we always used to say at camp, people before programs. So I think that's what you guys came to, that realization that program was coming in front of people, and you needed to take a step back and focus on what was important, which is great.
Yeah, and you're still, like I said, you still have a focus, you still have a moving forward. But we just toned it down a little bit and really made it, world themed, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ruby, what's your last theme idea?
Just to add on to that, I think one of the times that a theme can be really useful is when you are looking at a really high retention rate on your staff. And that can be the time when you're like, they've all seen this stuff, and we can do lots of different things and do things in lots of different ways. But by putting that theme in, it does show them, like, this year's going to be a little different, and you can show that right away. So I think that can be, when you're going back and forth between not having a theme and having a theme, that could be something that could be a catalyst for for thinking about jumping in and doing a more elaborate theme that year. So my last one I wanted to share is actually, it's kind of secret because we're going to do it this summer, but we're going to do a theater theme this summer. All the world's a stage, so is camp. And so lots of little things that come with this. One of the things that as we are doing some themes going forward is I'm rewriting our staff manual right now. And we're hoping to set it up so that every year when we get our staff manuals printed, because we will probably continue to print them for at least a few more years, to have the cover reflect the theme. So this year it'll be a playbill, kind of looking like the front of a program, but the content will be the same through the rest of the staff manual, but just that cover will be different. And hopefully maybe that makes it something that the staff will cherish a little more, and as they collect them and you go back and look back through the years of like, oh, I have the playbill one, and I have the one that was set up like a course catalog at a university, and I have the Christmas one, like all that kind of stuff. So some of the things that we're incorporating, lots of musical numbers. We're basically going to have a musical of the day, and that'll relate to whatever we're talking about that day. We plan to put stars on the doors of the cabins when the staff move in, and put signs on the bathrooms that say like dressing room, and like write on the mirrors like you're a star, all those kind of things that you see in the movies. Our big celebration at the end of staff training will be a cast party, well done, take a bow, and let's celebrate what you've completed so far. But again, like the production is just beginning. At the end of the summer, we're going to tie it all together by our final staff banquet being the Tony Awards. Nice. And it's going to give us an opportunity to recognize some of the best performances of the summer, and hopefully incorporating video that we've captured, but also actual awards and, speeches and all that kind of good stuff. I think the thing that really creates is, again, that idea that this is you are on stage, and you're on stage when you're working all the time. And so to understand that, and there's times when you're on stage and you're wearing costumes and you're being silly and you're being very outright, but sometimes your role is to step back because you can't steal the focus, because then the story doesn't happen very well. So I think there's some really cool ways that thematically you can make that work. Also, I really love to have dance breaks during my staff training. I think I've talked about that before. So, like they always say, why doesn't that happen in real life? Like music just comes on and people start dancing. Well, we do that in staff training all the time anyway, so it'll especially fit this year, which is great. But again, being part of something bigger too, and that's something that I think we've seen in a lot of these themes that we've talked about. That it's not just working with kids. Like we all have to collaborate. That's a big part of working in theater, is that everybody's role is really important, and you are a part of this larger picture to make this experience happen. So yeah, theater theme, lots of fun ways you can go with that.
Nice. And this is why Ruby and I are friends, because my last one has a lot to do with what she just talked about. Nice. So when Glenmore had its 75th anniversary, our theme was like stars in the universe. And we took it from scripture, but we used stars in a variety of different ways. So when they arrived, they were greeted and treated like stars when they arrived, with paparazzi running around taking photos, and they were given VIP name tags. There were welcome baskets in the cabin groups, with like all M&Ms with the green ones taken out and stuff like that, like all the funny things that stars would have in their dressing room, bottles of water and so on, although they were Camp Nalgene's. One night we had it was the opening night, we had the star treatment, so they could go around and have a spa treatment and hair wraps and nail polish and all those kinds of things. We put them in constellation groups for the week. We did things like we allowed people to, how you can go to a grocery store or sometimes Tim Hortons or something, and you can buy the paper stars that they're selling for a charity, and you put your name on it, or they have a shoe, or, different things that you do that. So what we did was they could purchase a star and hang it in the dining hall, but the way that they purchased it was to write their name on it and what they have to donate to camp to the summer. So they wrote their gifts and talents there. One night they came dressed as their favorite star, which was just a different play on the word. On the Saturday morning, so they arrived Friday night, and on the Saturday morning for the new people, we allowed them to buy maps to all the stars' homes and go for a tour. So that's how we kind of worked that in. We did a planet initiative where we had to do all these initiatives throughout the site, but they had to stay in their constellation form, which which was really quite funny to watch. So they had to go around the solar system. We had the Glenmore Walk of Fame one night for dinner where they had to come up and they got to put their hands in finger paint and put it onto the paper so it looked like they were putting their hands in cement and sign their name. And, you know, there was a red carpet and flashlights were on the road kind of guiding the way. And what made me giggle when Ruby was talking is we did have the Tony Awards. And we had each constellation group perform a musical. So we gave them a story, something even as simple as like the Paper Bag Princess. And they had time in the afternoon to work out how they would act it out and add songs in that they already knew. And then awards were given out at the end of the night for best adaptation of a play and best score and best director. And amazingly, every constellation got an award. It was crazy how that worked out. And then this is the year that I've talked about it before in previous podcasts, but this is the year that we put the glow in the dark stars on the ceiling of the lodge after we shared what our dreams and prayers were for the children and campers and for each other. And when I was at camp last September, the glow in the dark stars are still on the ceiling. So we also talked about our impact. So stars that we see were there very long ago. So we don't know how we will have impacted somebody down the road until years later. So we talked a lot about that. And I think for me, one of the things is if you're going to do a theme like that is to make sure that you carry it throughout your days at training, that it's, you know, your evening programs or your campfires or your meals or at appropriate sessions, because obviously not every session should have some sort of character dancing around in it. Like if you're talking about recognizing child abuse or something, it's not the time and place for that. But if theme is important to your camp and this is how you're setting the example, you want to make sure that your theme doesn't fall flat by day 3 and is really lame for the rest of the session, because then it's not what you're hoping your staff will see and recognize for their job coming up. I also think that keeping it really as simple as possible for the kind of theme that you choose is key, because it's the more flexible it can be and the more you can work with it is easy. So not picking something that's really, really specific, like stars, you can go anywhere with it. So keep it kind of simple. I always love to have somebody on staff who is good with metaphors, and then they can help the theme to sink in. Using the same kind of characters or repetitive phrases throughout training really helps to have it sink in. But those need to be simple again. Music, banners, costumes, all that kind of stuff. So one of the things that I would always do is Travis and I would come up with the training and what needed, what we wanted to incorporate and what the important aspects of it were, and then invite our spring staff who is up and those staff there for outdoor ed to really work on the theme and let them run with it, because they could be so creative and so fun, and delegating all that out made it a lot easier, but it also created a lot of buy-in. So it wasn't Travis and me sitting there coming up with everything all by ourselves. A lot of the creativity, even some of the stuff that I've suggested today, were not my ideas, but those of our senior staff. So letting them be a part of it is really helpful too, I think. Okay. Anybody got anything else before our lovely Gab does her recap? All right. Well, then let's let Gab do that.
Okay. So whether you decide to do a theme or not, these are great ideas to either pepper in throughout your staff training, or really commit and make it the star of your staff training. Okay, so here are some of the things that we talked about today. We're making history. That's for mostly when we have a lot of new staff coming to camp. Come as a child. There's a lot of cool things you can do. For example, play for the sake of playing, tea party, puppets, birthday parties, forts, create 3D maps. Use a movie like Elf to inspire that childlike wonder. Epic fail. Maybe don't make that the theme of your staff training, but perhaps put that in throughout your staff training. We really want staff to take risks. And speaking of risks, real reality. Reality TV has some pretty fun themes, as long as we're making it clear that reality TV isn't maybe the best role model, but we can flip it and show how it can be. Stars. We talked a lot about stars. VIP, M&Ms, let's take out those green ones because, green M&Ms, nobody really loves them. A trash ball, that's in Kahurangi, and these are also things to keep in mind when you're coming up with your themes. Is it going to help enhance my staff training? When should I use it? Make sure that you're using and involving returning staff members to help expand the theme. Make sure that they're in appropriate sessions, and also make sure that you commit to it. If you're going to highlight that there's a theme that staff training, it really should be a big impact at the beginning, middle, and end, which is usually the theme of Camp Code: beginning, middle, and end.
Well, that was very well wrapped up. Good job.
Thank you.
So here's how you can get involved. You can join us on hashtag Camp Code. We'd love to hear from you, the topics you'd like us to discuss, or guests you would recommend that we talk to, or any great leadership training tips that you have to share with us. We would love to hear from you because, as we know, we're all about sharing in this industry. And if you have found this podcast to be useful, please leave a rating and review for us in iTunes. And you can do that simply by going to camphacker.tv/cc_iTunes. Or tweet your love of the show by going to camphacker.tv/campcodelove. Your feedback helps us keep the show going. So before we wrap up, this is how you can get in touch with us. Ruby?
So you can follow me on Twitter. I'm RubyLynn85. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's Ruby Outdoors. And then you can also learn more about Green River Preserve at greenriverpreserve.org.
Thanks. Gab?
You can follow me both on Twitter and Instagram, which is Gabrielle Rail, and Rail has 2 L's. And you can also check out where I work at waro.com.
And you can find me, Beth, at camphacker.tv, or on our website, camphacker.tv, or our new adventure on Go Camp Pro, and also on Twitter at camphacker. Ruby, we have a very exciting show coming up. Would you like to tell us about it?
Indeed. So about this time that this podcast comes out, the 3 of us, the Camp Code hosts, will all be in the same room and in the same town for the first time ever since the launch of this show, which is pretty exciting. So we are going to be at ACA National in New Orleans, and we are presenting a session there, and we'll be getting together during that conference and recording a podcast, some of our best lessons learned from the conference. We'll be talking about those.
And we can hardly wait. Our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And as always, we would love to hear some of your memorable moments or most effective tips. And you can tell us what they are using that hashtag Camp Code. But this week, we're going to hear from Gabrielle.
So my best practice is I got from a friend who's a teacher, and basically at the end of his lesson he would ask, does anybody have questions? And as usual, there's cricket sounds, or nothing, just books ready to be packed up and everybody run out of class, which is fine, except for the next day when the students would come to class. They had all these questions. They didn't finish their assignment properly because they didn't understand it, so on and so forth. So he started doing a very, very simple trick, which was, please write down your top 3 questions or your top 1 question. And that really forced people to sit down and reflect if they did have any questions, or if they were shy to ask a question, that there's a place to do so. And so I do that during my staff training now. And what I do with all of these questions is I actually get people to pair up and then see if they can answer those questions within the team. And then if that team is stumped, then they bring it to the larger group. And we also really make sure that we do this not, if we tell the staff that we're going to be done at 10:30 and there's going to be a break at 10:30, we don't do this exercise at 10:27. I make sure that it's done at 10:20. But almost all of the sessions I run, they all know that there's going to be questions that are going to be asked. And it really, really works. It's great. And it forces staff members to really start thinking ahead of, there are questions and it's my responsibility to know the information. So I really love this tip. I use it all the time.
That's great. Thank you for that piece of advice. I think we can all use that. So that's it for today. Don't forget to join us on the hashtag Camp Code. And thanks for the listening, friends.